Greetings, I'm Kristian from Cinema Nova and welcome to the Intermission Interviews. My guest today is the Academy Award-winning filmmaker behind feature documentaries Taxi to the Dark Side, 2016 Refugee Expose Chasing Asylum, and more recently, Bikram, Yogi Guru Predator. She joins me from Los Angeles, California. Welcome to the Intermission Interviews, Eva Orner. So Eva, as an Australian in Los Angeles, what's your view of the COVID-19 crisis?
I guess, I feel like I've lived here for a long time. I've lived in America for 15 years and I'm a dual citizen, but at times like this, it's more appealing to be back home in Australia. We're not doing very well here. And I'll be very candid and say, and I would put that down 100% to our federal government. It's a disaster. The response has been pathetic. I think we're really lucky in California. We have a great governor, Governor Newsom, and a great mayor, Mayor Garcetti, and they've been really strict and tough and, consistent and doing all they can to get, it was announced yesterday that all California now get testing for free, which is amazing because we've been lagging in testing so much. But it's a little scary in terms of how we get out of this. I don't think they've got a good plan moving forward because unlike Australia, we haven't shut down the states. I think that's one of the genius things Australia did is just lock down the states. The problem here is if California gets a handle on it, in Georgia, which has increasing numbers, the idiot governor there is opening it up this week. So there'll probably be, an implosion. And then if people come from Georgia to here, then it comes back here. And so how do we, it's a big country, it's a lot of states, they need to all be locked down until we contain it. And I think that just shows the absolute lack of federal leadership in this country.
Mm. Yeah, as looking at the Australian news media, what we tend to see is a lot of the focus on Trump and how, whatever he's done that day. We don't really get to see it on a more kind of on a state level or on what have you. But what are you kind of seeing? How are you seeing it portrayed in the media in terms of what's going on in different states? How is, for instance, the Georgia situation portrayed to the population of Los Angeles?
It's so interesting. I was watching Trump's daily briefings for a while just because I'm a complete political news junkie, but at some point you have to turn off because, it's just so, when he tells people, he starts saying, you should inject yourself with disinfectant. It's like, I can't. It's a mental health thing where you have to protect yourself from these insanity and toxicity. But, we do tend every day to turn on like a little bit of CNN or MSNBC and occasionally we'll turn a little bit of Fox on. And, I listen to NPR a lot. But I get the headlines from Trump. I read the New York Times, the LA Times every day. But that's where we hear things. But I feel like the majority of people probably don't read and look at as much. So their information is often misinformation. And that's part of the problem in America. People aren't educated to what's happening. It was pretty aware that the governor of Georgia is a complete fool. His name's Brian Kemp, and he didn't win the election. He stole the election from Stacey Abrams, an African-American Democrat who's amazing, who's a potential presidential candidate with Biden. And he admitted about 2 weeks ago that he didn't realise that people who are asymptomatic could pass the disease on to other people. It's like, oh, I just learned that today. And it's like, well, you should not be the governor. And then 2 weeks later, as the numbers in Georgia are going up, and they have a huge problem with the African-American community there. The country, I think the state is 30% African-American. And I think like 80% of cases are African-American because they're all the people working in the service industry and in danger. And they're opening everything up. And even the president said he didn't agree with that and he thought that was a bad idea. But, what he should be doing is saying federally nobody can open until, whatever date it is. But he doesn't have that. He's not a leader. He doesn't have any brains. He doesn't have any vision. He doesn't have any understanding of science. Mm-hmm. And also he's too gutless to do anything. So he's leaving it to the governors. And so the problem is some states have good governors, some states have bad governors. And what that does is divide us more on partisan lines because, the Democrats tend to be a little bit more sensible and highly regarding of science. So it's really, I don't know how we're going to get out of it long term. I think the rest of the world will be functioning in the months ahead and no one will be coming here because we will be the country that's the worst. And that's pretty horrifying.
And it's compounded, obviously, by the federal election in November, which is obviously, I think, about 6 months away at the moment. But because that's on the horizon, people say, well, that's the opportunity to deal with that problem, is to change a government. But obviously 6 months is a long time under the current circumstances.
And he's going to do everything he can to, corrupt the election or, whatever he can, because that's all he wants to do is win, and that's all he cares about. And, he's not once had a meaningful conversation about the 60,000 people that have died, the families, the loss, what that means. There's just no leadership there. There's no compassion. There's no empathy. It's really, it's like nothing we've ever seen before. So it's definitely been, interesting and challenging and scary. And, again, California's doing pretty well for a state with 40 million people. We've got a good budget, a good economy, good leadership. It's a very progressive state, but, we're part of a country. I wish we could secede. It would be great.
You can actually separate California from the rest of the United States. Perhaps that's an option. I was just going to say, in some of your past films, you've talked about the importance of the media and how the media can obviously influence public opinion. And in the United States, what I think we've seen the media now be seen as partisan. You've either got the left or the right of the political spectrum, but very little in the middle. So how does that kind of impact on people's ability to react to the crisis when it's being so filtered by the politics of the media organisation itself?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really biased and simplistic and left wing, and I'm just going to blame Rupert Murdoch and Fox News for all of our problems. I honestly think, the MSNBCs and the CNNs have to do what they do to counteract Fox, and Fox has such a big audience. And what it does is it enables someone like Donald Trump to come in and just start saying fake news and, the media is the enemy of the people, and suddenly we're teetering on being a dictatorship and an authoritarian regime. So, it's a mess. But as an Australian, I always come back to it and just say, it's Rupert Murdoch, it's Fox. It's no other country has what we have. And no other country is as divided, I don't believe, as we are. And I mean, God, today in Michigan, there were armed men and women in like the government house in Michigan, doing the whole, open the country, open the state, but they burst into a government building and they were fully armed. I mean, what is happening here? It's like militias, and that's legal. And it's like, we've just gone so past the point of no return. And I really think it's all, it's fueled by Fox, it's fueled by the NRA, it's fueled by, billionaire right-wing monsters who fund all of this. We're a step away from losing the Supreme Court for the next generation, and it's just, it feels rough here. But there is still good journalism. I do believe the New York Times and the LA Times and the Washington Post, and I do believe in all of that. I believe in the New Yorker. I really believe in journalism. A lot of the work I do is journalistic. And it's a good time to be telling stories and telling, the truth of what's happening in the world. But, it's a battle, and sometimes you feel like you're losing.
Yeah, I imagine it feels that way. And I mean, when we think about how perhaps history might frame this, I mean, as a filmmaker, where do you start in a scenario like this? How do you kind of try and unpack something so massive and sort of compact it down into something that potentially future generations might be able to understand the gravity of?
I mean, I've got a really weird take on this, but because it's something I'm super interested in and something I'm working on. But COVID is COVID. There will be more viruses like this. We've had them before, not to this level, but we've had, God, had Ebola not being contained, it would have been huge. We had the plague, the Spanish flu, the plague. This is always going to happen, particularly if we all keep eating meat and processing animals the way we are and things like that. This will at some point. There will be a vaccine. A lot of people will have tragically died. Families will be destroyed. Economies will be destroyed. But once this is over, there's a much bigger existential threat that's been facing us around the world for 30 plus years, and we do jack shit about it, which is climate change. And so to me, this is a really weird time where I think what will be interesting is how we go back to normal and what normal will be after this, because it's a lot of people are talking about, consumerism, spending money the way we did, the difference the world shutting down has made on the environment. You guys have just come out of this fire season, just like this hellish summer. Donald Trump over here is already, in the last 2 weeks, has already been like lowering all of the environmental regulations that are left still in place from the Obama era. He's just slashing them all because, it's all about increasing the economy and getting the economy back. So things like gas, for cars, petrol regulations, it's all been deregulated. The car manufacturers don't have to adhere to any standards anymore. And it's like, are we going to learn something from this and address the biggest crisis facing us after we get through this? Or are we just going to keep going the way we're going, and in 20 or 30 years we'll be at a point of no return, probably 5 years? So to me, it's really interesting. To me, I feel like if this doesn't galvanise people to do something, what will? But there'll also be a fatigue at the end of COVID where people will just want to be like, human nature is just, let's celebrate, let's forget it all. But to me, I actually think this is putting a bigger spotlight on the importance for us to unite and, do something about climate change.
Yeah, if there's one potentially exciting thing out of all of this, it might well be that we see what would probably have been an unimaginable cultural shift only 6 months ago, because we've just been thrust into this and inevitably we'll have to react. I'll be curious to sort of see how things change in terms of the way people view, as you say, consumerism and capitalism and the environment, because I think you're right, we are at a turning point here. And, on that topic, taking perhaps a turning point in our conversation, as somebody who's working in the entertainment industry, the filmmaking industry over there in California, how do you anticipate the industry itself will actually manage to get out of this current circumstance and get back to work?
I mean, my experience and my world is much smaller. It's documentary. There are some people are continuing production with documentaries. There's a couple of people doing COVID films at the minute. You can shoot with very small crews in very contained spaces. A lot of people, if you're in post-production, you're not in a bad position. A lot of post is still going. Obviously, everyone's working at home. Stuff's being finished. If you're in production on a large scale, you're kind of screwed and down to a halt globally. And if you're in development, which I am, on a number of projects, you're fine, because it's all about, a lot of Zooming, a lot of phone calls, a lot of writing, a lot of reading, a lot of researching. And also people are still pitching. When this happened on the first day, we got into isolation. My agents are fantastic, and they called and they're like, everything's shifting to Zoom and we're pitching. So people are still buying because there's going to be this huge hole in production, and people are going to be desperate for product. So we're not in this terrible situation, which is, a huge relief. I thought it'd be a lot worse. And I've already been pitching a couple of projects. We're actually expecting an offer on one next week. And I might even be able to gear up into pre-production pretty much straight away and be shooting in like June, because it's not in America. It's in a country that's doing better. A really good friend of mine is James McTeague, who's shooting one of the Matrix film in Berlin. He lives around the corner from me in LA. He's Australian, and he came back from Berlin, I guess, a month or more ago. And they're sort of trying to work out, because Berlin's doing really well now, about how to get back. And, things, I feel like in other countries things are starting. I know Netflix has got some stuff in some countries that's gearing up. Economically, I don't know how the studios and everyone will cope. I think Netflix is doing great because they're making more money than ever. I think the streamers are doing well. Amazon's doing great. It's, I don't know. I'm a member of the Academy and of Motion Pictures and the Arts, and we just got an email yesterday saying that films didn't have to have a theatrical release to qualify for Oscar nomination this year, which is always one of the benchmarks you have to hit. The films have to have an intended cinema release, and you have to be able to prove that. So things are changing, but it's going to be weird. Film releases, I don't know, when are people really going to want to go back to cinemas in America? It's very different from Australia because the numbers here are so big. Mm-hmm. All the festivals. I noticed the other day a bunch of festivals are going online, which is amazing. Mm-hmm. All the awards will be gone. Who cares? But, all of that gives the industry momentum. I don't know. I guess at the end of the day, I don't know. People want to see stories and people want to watch things. So I think we'll be okay long term. But I don't know. I'm more concerned about people who are dying. Yep. People who are losing their businesses, and you drive down. For you guys, I guess it's like driving down Brunswick Street or Fitzroy Street, and when I drive down streets here that are shopping streets, I sort of look at all the stores and think, what's going to come back? What's going to disappear? It's pretty heartbreaking.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it certainly is. A lot of people's lives will be, will really have to go back to zero, and hopefully they'll be able to get back on their feet fairly quickly. Well, look, thank you very much for joining us today, Eva. It's really terrific to have a chat to you and to get your viewpoint on what's happening over there in the United States. And, we wish you all the best and good luck with
Thank
things
you.
when they do return to normal and getting back into production.
We'll get there. I didn't want to end on such a downer, actually. I should just probably say, I mean, there's been an awful, as always in shitty situations, there's always amazing stories of, people banding together and doing incredible stuff. So I think we have to just really focus on that so we don't get pulled down into it. And then, look into the future of how we can do things better and avoid things like this in the future. But it definitely has brought out, as these situations always do, the best and the worst from people, as you would expect. But I would love to be in Australia right now.
Indeed. Well, I'm sure a lot of people would. Well, again, thank you so much and all the best over there in LA.
Thanks. Bye.